Let's do this. So we're going to start off with our keynote speaker, Abraham and Pearl, and they're going to talk to you about actions on Google.
We're going to talk to you about actions on Google, which is so much fun. We really like making apps for the Google Home, but you can also make apps for other devices as well.
So I'm Abraham.
Abraham. I'm Pearl. Huge Abraham.
We came in from Madison, Wisconsin. We work at a tech company called Bendyworks. We're both also Google developer experts, and we actually organize our own Google developer group, Madison.
Yes. So if you're in Madison, Wisconsin, come and check it out. You can follow along with today's slides at slides.today.
And they will also be there tomorrow.
And the day after. But maybe not forever.
Maybe not forever.
They'll be there until we give our next talk. So maybe you've heard, voice is the new platform. The Economist had a cover story not that long ago announcing this. And I think at least some of you must have a close relationship with Siri or the Google Assistant or Alexa. They have become part of our daily lives.
And something that most of these have in common is they're being accessible more and more via voice. And although, even though my aunt said on Facebook that voice is the new platform, in reality what we're starting to see is that AI is actually the new platform.
So the Google Assistant is available on the Google Home via voice, but it's also available on your phone, it's available by text. So these new characters in our lives are I think, better thought of as AIs rather than just simple voice apps.
So we're going to mostly talk about the Google Assistant and how you in this particular presentation, but there's a bunch of other different kind of ways that you can interact with it. So for example...
Yes, these are all different ways that you can talk. That you can develop for the Google Assistant. We're going to be talking about actions on Google in this talk.
There's also the Assistant SDK is what the Code Lab is more about, and that's where you have hardware and you want to make the Assistant available on that hardware. And then the Smart Home is a different sort of platform where you have this hardware bit that you're developing and you want to make that controllable via the Assistant, and that's something we won't be talking about.
But it's there. You can read up on it. And it's part of the Google Assistant. So we have made an app for the Google Assistant to show you what it can do. It's called Movie Maven, and we'll take it for a spin here.
And demos always work in Keynote, so
nothing has ever gone wrong.
Hey Google, let me talk to Movie Maven.
Okay, here's the test version of Movie Maven.
Hi, I'm Movie Maven. Let's find a movie. What genre?
How about a comedy?
Does The Nut Job 2, Nutty by Nature, sound good? How about another movie?
Okay, another one.
You should watch Captain Underpants, the first epic movie. How about another movie?
This time, an adventure movie.
Does Thor sound good? Would you like another suggestion?
No thanks.
Okay, see you later.
So we'll talk in some detail about how we made that app, but first we should talk about developing apps for the voice.
I was just thinking we should probably change the text to "hear you later." So a lot of development these days tends to be very visual. You're building a website, you're building a mobile application, people look at it and they touch things or they click on things. Voice is kind of a different design pattern that most of us are not familiar with.
We're certainly familiar with how not to do it. We've all had the experience with the horrible voice tree when you are trying to accomplish something over the phone, right? Press 1 for this option, press 2 for this option.
Our menu has changed. Please listen to everything that was new 4 months ago.
And if you don't do things in exactly the right way, it's hard to get back to where you were before. You have to hang up and call again and start over. So that's not the user experience that we want to create.
And so we really want to think about, you're building this new voice user interface. What are some things that are important to build into that UI? One is that you want to be cooperative. So if the user typically comes to your app with a goal that they want to accomplish, and you should let them just kind of do that. You shouldn't have them go through 25 steps to finally get to the point where they can do the thing they want to do and get on with their life.
Yes, so this is one of the best practices that Google talks about, to let your user enter at different points. Try to work with what your user says instead of forcing them down a rigid path.
Instill confidence, and this manifests in a couple of different ways. One is just saying, okay, sure, I'll get right on that. That kind of, we're doing a thing. There's also repeating what the user did. So you're saying, order me a pizza. The assistant can say, okay, we're ordering a pizza for you. So that, they just say, okay, maybe you're actually ordering something that's not a pizza, but if the assistant doesn't confirm with you, you don't know, and it just shows up an hour later, and it's actually, a Snickers bar. And
yes, so certainly for transactions, for if you're writing apps that do something in the real world, having your user confirm that you're going to do what they actually want you to do is definitely important. And act natural is important. Do not be a robot.
Can you actually do I can't actually do a robot dance.
So and this is kind of difficult. So when you think about writing an app for the voice, it's important to make your app sound natural, use the kinds of words that we use when we actually speak, which is pretty different than written language, and to use some variety. I think variety is really important. So with our movie Maven, I think we could do better at this, but we at least have some different things that the Maven can say when it is wondering if you want another suggestion.
And one of the ways that Google promotes acting natural is that when you're building apps, they have a number of different languages that are supported, and you can do different styles for each one, so you can better conform to those local customs and culture. And we'll talk a little bit more about language later.
Yes.
So this is the key kind of like, you jump into an app and you ask it to do something, and this happens through Google's interface. What actually happens behind the scene is Google takes that audio, converts it to text, and then just does an HTTP request to whatever server you tell it to do.
But so you can create your apps directly with the Actions SDK. However, there is a better and easier way.
What? There is, you say?
There's a better way. Dialogflow, formerly called API.ai. I'm sort of sorry that they changed the name because I like to say API.ai. So, but Dialogflow is a wonderful tool that works with the actions on Google and allows you to write at least part of your app without having to write any code. You can do it in a console that Dialogflow supplies. That's quite easy to use.
I would also make the argument that a flow of dialogues is not very exciting.
But API.ai, that's exciting.
AI API is pretty cool.
So the Google Assistant talks to Actions on Google, which talks to your agent in Dialogflow. In Dialogflow, the center of your app is your agent.
And you can kind of think of it as an AI persona that you are building, and you are building on Dialogflow that they will manage a bunch of the awesomeness of it.
So that's where your business logic for the voice interaction part of your app lives, is in your agent. So a user says something, blah, 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 blah. That input is passed by actions on Google to your Dialogflow agent. Your agent parses that input from your user and matches it to an intent that you have defined, and we'll talk more about that. Then your intent is mapped onto an action, and then your action is performed.
Is acted upon?
Is acted upon. And we'll talk about all this in some more detail.
So intents are pretty much, a different, they're essentially the different types of things users might want to do on your application. And this is just kind of a basic list of a couple. The real kind of nitty-gritty of where they get more fun is that in a specific intent, for example, this intent is, I want to get a movie. You list out a bunch of different phrases that your users might use to trigger your action.
And you want to have a variety of phrases, both to help train the AI, and as we'll talk about it in a little bit, to help people find your app.
And this is part of being cooperative, where you have a bunch of people ask to get a movie in a bunch of different ways, and so you want to cover as many of those as possible.
And then the highlighted words are words that are part of what's called an entity. Entities are groups of words, sort of domains of knowledge that you define, and in your phrases you identify what are entities, and then the AI can learn that, okay, words that appear in these sorts of places and these sorts of phrases are entities, and we should look them up in your entity definition.
And so for our Movie Maven example, we've just defined an entity of genre, and we've told Dialogflow, I almost said API.ai, we told Dialogflow where to look for it in phrases, and we've predefined a bunch of different categories. This is a pretty small list, but you could expand this to many, many more.
And you don't see it here because the UI changed and we wanted a slide that represented the new UI. But at any rate, so we have synonyms for each of these categories. So for instance, comedy, we would also put funny, or other words that we think users might say that we would want mapped onto that genre.
And if you do multiple of those, Dialogflow will understand that they all mean the same thing or related things, and handle that properly. You can actually, there's a bunch of pre-built agents that Dialogflow provides. So if you want to do something, for example, build an app to leverage food delivery, then you can hit a button and it will actually import tons and tons of pre-built intents and the language to automatically do that. So it's a quick way to just kind of get started and play with the system.
Now, okay, so you've defined your intents in Dialogflow. I almost said Dialog.ai. In Dialogflow, those intents are mapped to actions that you name, and then you need to fulfill those actions. You need to tell Dialogflow what to do. Sometimes you can do that in the Dialogflow itself.
Yeah, you can configure Dialogflow to just return some text, and that will get read to the user. The more kind of advanced way that we expect most people will use it is with an HTTP request, where Dialogflow will make an HTTP request to your server to code that you control, that you can do whatever you want in.
So we use a webhook in our app that then connects to an app that we wrote in Node, right here, using the Actions on Google Node library. And we create an instance of a Dialogflow app, and our app receives the action and decides how to respond, makes calls to a third-party API that has movie recommendations, and then sends that back to Dialogflow.
And if you build websites in Node, you'll notice that this flow is very similar to building a site where you instantiate, use, what is it, Express, very similar to Express, where you build an app, and then you have this kind of mapping of intents that are coming in, what action they should trigger, and then you actually just execute your own code directly, and you can do whatever you want in your own code. So
handle request is a built-in method, and you list your actions. You create a map, and then welcome, ask genre, and get movie are our own methods that we define.
So in your code, you've went off and found a movie from whatever proprietary service or open source service or however you wanted to do it. And now you need to convey that back to the user. And this happens by telling Dialogflow what to do.
Yes. So there are a couple of built-in methods that you can use. Ask and tell. So tell is a method that you would use when you're not expecting your user to say something to respond. You won't be listening for a response. Ask is when you will be listening for a response. And probably tells Dialogflow to raise his voice at the end, maybe, in a question-like way.
In a question-like way?
Why, yes.
The other thing that ask will do is it will leave the mic open on Google's side so that the user, it's listening for a user to respond to you. So they don't have to go through that whole keyword Google.
Yeah.
To make sure I'm not triggering her.
Yeah, oh, yeah. So you can tell Dialogflow not only what to say, but how to say it, at least to some degree. You can choose a voice. Our Maven is a male voice, or a couple different male voices, a couple different female voices you can use. And then you can use SSML, which stands for what?
Speech Synthesis Markup Language.
You can use speech synthesis markup language to tell your app to, for instance, spell out letters, to say SSML instead of small, to say 10 versus 10. You can add pauses and other
Did you
pauses.
Intentionally pause after pauses?
Yes, I did.
And there's some more advanced things you can do with this. You can pull in audio files. They actually just announced a couple of new things. I actually haven't looked at how it works, but they announced something that theoretically will help improve or help you fine-tune like the cadence if you're reading poetry. So that could have some fun, bring it back to bad high school poetry.
I think we need Movie Maven to talk in iambic pentameter. We'll work on that for next time. Yeah.
Add accents.
What's that?
You can add accents.
Accents.
You can use different languages. I don't know about adding accents, but that's a good question.
You could play audio files that have accents, but you have to build those audio files yourself.
It doesn't come with pre-built,
There's not
Brooklyn
there's not a speak this with an Ohio accent.
But there's no Ohio accent. Okay, go on.
I would just be like, oh, you want to go for a Midwest accent? Here, we're from Wisconsin, so let's put more references to cheese in it.
You can manage state a little bit in your app. It's just temporary, just for the life of the session. So for instance, in Movie Maven, we want people to be able to ask for another recommendation in the genre that they've already specified. So we can save that genre in this data object and use it. Use it to answer the question.
And that's a quick way where you can just have a little bit of session data, and that will last from when you say the keyword to the time that the mic goes dead and you're out of that conversation, and that can avoid you from doing things like having to do authentication, which can be a bit of a bit tricky to get right, or having your own server-side database.
Yeah, so that's handy again for data that's not persistent, but that lasts for a short amount of time. So now you've got an app. You've got intents, you've got actions, you've got your webhook,
and you're done. You can go on vacation.
No, you can't. You have to. This is the best part. You train your bot.
One of the awesome things that Dialogflow does is it will actually show you a list of phrases that people have said to it that don't match anything that it knows about. It doesn't know how to handle that. So this is a quick example of, we said, how about a comedy? And at the point of saying this, our app didn't know how to handle that. It just handled other approaches of getting a movie. And so it shows, hey, we don't know what to do with this. And you can go into the UI and say, when someone says this phrase, this is the genre of it, this is the genre entity, and map it to this intent.
And you can, you can very easily add words to your entity in this interface. So it's very nice.
And every time you add some more of these, it makes Dialogflow smarter about how it handles intents coming in from the user.
Now there is a simulator that you can use to test things out, to interact with your app and make sure it's responding in the way that you would expect.
And some of the neat things that this simulator will do is you can simulate location, authentication, payment flows, so you can do pretty much everything you want pretty easily. But it's also not quite as good as practicing on real hardware, so go drop that $1,000 on the new Pixel phone,
because you need one.
You got to spend money to make money. So
yes, the question. So the question is, once you train your app, would you need to go back and retrain it? I think it does keep track of unmatched requests. So I would think you'd want to keep an eye on that. But it's not gonna forget what it knows. So if nothing changes about your app, you wouldn't need to retrain. Yeah.
When you say it keeps track of unmatched requests, on the device itself, or
in the console. So we showed here. So when it receives a request, when your app, is that me?
It's haunted.
When your app receives a request that it doesn't know what to do with, that is logged. I'm going to stand totally still. I don't know what's happening.
Acts less natural.
Yes. Do you have anything to add?
So yeah, I'm trying to think of, basically every time you change something about this is the intents, this is the category, this is the entities, every time you hit one of those buttons, Dialogflow basically builds a new machine learning model. And so every time you make some changes, it basically will retrain everything in that instance. And as every time you assign new things that users spoke that didn't match, it adds additional training data for that model.
Yes?
Is there a limitation to how much, you were saying that it stores data for a certain amount of time. So if you have a particularly long conversation and you have no idea what movie you want and 50 movies later you still haven't decided, is it going to repeat movies that's already requested? Or?
So the question is, well, I think that's a several part question. So one question is, will Movie Maven repeat movies? And the answer is yes, because of the way we programmed it in the Node app. We use a random number generator, and it's not an unlimited. To minimize requests, we're only getting I forget how many movies, but a chunk of movies, and we're not going back to the server for more. So it's not a great app, but it's for demo.
What? I thought it was a great app. We should probably get a couple more things on. A lot of that stuff is controlled in your own application code, and not something that is just kind of given to you.
I guess is there a way to, if you want to store all the movies that the person has basically passed on, and you don't want to suggest something that they've already passed. Is that something that's possible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you can, so once the code gets to Node, that is your server code, that is your JavaScript, or if you want to do .NET, you can do .NET, whatever language you want to do it in, that's your code, and you can do whatever you want. You can have a database, you can have an API, you can store data, you can do anything you would normally do with a writing application.
Yes. There's some more questions, but okay, one more and then let us move on.
Can we train to understand languages other than English?
Yes, and we'll show you a list.
Right here.
Oh, right here. Here we go. So yes, right now.
That's a great segue to getting back on track
Yes.
with slides.
So there are a limited number of languages right now: English, German, Japanese, Korean, French, Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian were just added, and more languages will be added over time. And I think for English, there's UK English, Canadian English, Australian English, so you can...
I think there's even Canadian English.
No, there's not.
There is.
No, there is. I'm Canadian, but you can't tell from my English.
Somebody here was like, I knew it. I knew it.
You knew it, eh?
And so one of the things is, these are the languages that the assistant, the actions on Google platform supports. There's also a different set of languages that is larger that the assistant is available in, and some of them just don't have access to the apps. And then there's an even larger set of languages that Dialogflow actually handles. And you might be like, how does that make any sense? Well, it actually turns out Dialogflow will work with any platform, so you can build a Facebook chatbot or a Twilio SMS bot, and those can support any of the languages. So you can actually build an app with Dialogflow where Actions on Google is a distribution model for it, but it also gets distributed on WhatsApp and Twilio and all these other places. And
you can use Actions on Google without using Dialogflow
yes.
as well. These are, yeah, mix and match. Okay, we've got an app. Now
we're really done, right?
Almost. So now we want to get our app out in the public. We want to get our app in front of users. So how do we do that? Abraham, how do we do that?
I'm just curious if anybody knows the name of this shuttle.
His idea to put that on the slide.
I like making the audience pander to me. So, because this is kind of a new platform, Google currently has some quality control checks on publishing applications. And so they will have you fill out some info of like a title, how you use your thing, some branding, icons. They'll make you have a terms of service.
If you have ever submitted an app to the App Store, this is a similar type of experience.
And as you're kind of doing this, you'll submit it to a review, and Google will actually have somebody go through a bunch of the flow of your application, and they'll actually give you useful feedback on it, how to improve it, what things don't make sense from a voice interaction experience standpoint.
So at this point, maybe this will change as more people start making apps for Actions on Google. But at this point, you can expect to get some feedback, to have some back and forth before your app will be published. And when it is published, how will people find it?
In the app directory, obviously.
So the app directory is kind of cumbersome. This is a screenshot from the app directory in my Google Home app on my phone. I don't know if there's a directory just, well, yeah, I don't know how there must be other ways that you get to the same directory. I'm not sure what they are. But it's magic. It's a very long list. So it can be a little bit cumbersome. So ideally, you would use some other ways to publicize your app. If people know the name of your app, they can ask for it by name.
I heard a beep when I...
Yeah. And a fairly new and very cool thing is implicit invocation. So if you ask the assistant for something that your app can provide, the assistant might forward that request to your app. Now, no guarantees, but and the documentation supplies a lot of advice about best practices to make that more likely to happen.
Yeah, it kind of seems like we're getting back into the space of a custom search engine optimization.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, pretty soon we'll have Google Apps, SEO, customization, emails coming to your inbox soon.
So if there are, you know, so if you say, hey Google, I'd like a recommendation for
Hey Google, stop.
Then, you know, if there are...
Sorry, I don't know how to help with that.
See, it doesn't work. If there are other apps, you know, if your app has competitors that provide the same kinds of things, and you've specified really similar intents, then maybe the other app will get invoked instead of your app. So this is a little bit Wild Westy, but it's a cool, if it's something that works for your app, this is a great way to have people who don't know that your app existed find out about it.
And this kind of is building on the idea that a user should be able to say a command, and even if it's not functionality that Google has directly built in, it should just kind of automatically work. And we're, you know, it's still very early stages, so it's not all there yet, but it's fun to play around with.
Yes. There are also some in preview right now, some ways to re-engage your users. There's daily updates. So if, for example, you have a weather app, it can automatically, you can program it to automatically send an update to your user to give them the day's weather every morning.
You can also do push notifications, where at any point you can trigger an asynchronous message to get pushed to the users. Currently that manifests and they get a pop-up on their phone. They will bring that to home and voice devices at some point in the future. And these things are experimental, so maybe they'll kill them, maybe they'll give everybody a cookie who uses them.
That's the most likely.
I don't work for Google, so I can't say what they're going to do.
Yeah. So we've tried to give you a sort of broad overview of making apps for using actions on Google for the assistant, which is lots of fun. I would recommend it, and you can make an app from start to finish, you know, in an afternoon.
You know, if only there was some way where all the fine folks here could get some hands-on experience.
Well, as a matter of fact, there will be a code lab that is coming to actions on Google kind of from a different direction. We're talking about extending the assistant with making apps, and in the code lab we'll talk about making the assistant available on your device, on your hardware.
That's at one right across the hall. There's a bunch of templates, which these are actually entire pre-built applications for actions on Google, and you can just take one and it gives you code samples, and you can run it and mess around with it and break it, and then spend some hours Googling to figure out what happened and how to fix it.
So that's one easy way to get started.
That's just the standard development flow. That's not specific to actions.
Google also has a newish program called Apps for Families that will, once your app goes through the process, will get a badge indicating that it's family appropriate, and will make it easy for parents to find. So that's something that if that's what you're working on, that's something worth checking out.
Transactions are, you can do a full shopping cart experience where you go through and give them some items and add them to a cart and then check out with that. And so using this transactions API, you can literally profit.
Profit?
And not the literally that is now defined as figuratively, like this is literally profit.
Or you can metaphorically profit from all of these wonderful AI tools.
You can emotionally profit?
You can profit emotionally.
Hey,
okay.
Google, tell the awesome presenters to finish up.
Presentation software frequently mentioned on the web include Microsoft
Hey Google, stop.
and others.
Hey Google, tell the awesome presenter to finish up.
Sure, let's get the test version of Awesome Presenter.
You can view these resources by going to slides.today. We are from Bendyworks if you need any help making your actions on Google app. Thank you for coming to Ohio DevFest 2017, and please let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you.
I think we have time for questions, yeah.
For re-engagement, can we re-engage through Google Home, or is it only through push notifications and other things on other devices?
Right now, this is all still in preview, and it's only for the phone. But it's coming to, it's supposedly coming to the home, but it's not there yet.
Google announced at, I think, Google I/O that they were going to bring push notifications to homes as a voice follow-up, but I don't think they worked that out, and they will probably release that to their first-party apps for a while and play with it, and then make it available to third-party developers.
Yes, in the blue.
How does this handle authentication? Like, you want persistent states, for an account or for a family account. How do you handle authentication?
So the question is, how does this handle authentication? So if you want to get some user information and also have a sort of persistent login.
There's two kind of ways that this will happen. One is there's a very basic permissions prompt where you can say, where you can request access to the user's name, and Google will verbally prompt the user to allow that, and you say yes, and then you just get their name. The more complex mode is you can do a full OAuth flow where Google will show a button on the page, or I think in the application, so you have to do this on a phone or a computer, and then it'll be available on the device or on the home. And you will then have to go through a flow, authenticate with whatever service, and come back, and then your application has an association with that Google user.
Other questions? Yeah.
So you guys may not know this, but when you support
We're experts. We know everything.
Well, so if you support German, do you have to do the legwork of so you did comedy and horror are genres. Will it translate and know the translation of comedy and horror? Do you have to do the legwork?
No. Let me repeat the question for the audience.
You can do it.
So the question is, in Movie Maven, will if we have this app in German, will it be able to translate the genres? So no. That is not. So the way that we're getting genres and movie recommendations is a third-party API. That all that logic is in our Node app, and has nothing to do with. I mean, obviously VF made it have something to do with actions on Google, but that's separate. So that kind of thing, that's your business logic that you would need to handle yourself.
There are ways that you can get Dialogflow to help with that, whereas as you're defining entities, you can have all of the different languages mapped to a machine-readable single one, so that comedy in 5 different languages all reference ID 5.
Yeah, so
and then
do you have to do that mapping yourself, or does it know the word in Russian for comedy for you if you enable Russian?
I think you have to do most of that yourself.
Yeah. Because all of that logic is happening on your server in your app, not.
You would think that somebody from Canada would have played around with French translations and would have a concrete answer.
But no, we don't know. But I think you have to do that manually. Question over here.
Yes, related to that question, the multi-language support. I'm a native Spanish speaker, and I'm usually fighting with Google. Okay, Google, it's this. And it's like, oh, you want to call Susan? I'm like, no, I want to go home. So how good is the
How good is the support for the multiple languages?
So we have only we have only used English in our apps, so so I don't know from firsthand experience. Now, I mean, does Google Translate? Well,
the way I understand how it works is that you have your home or your assistant configured for a particular language, and you always interact with it with that language. So if you're interacting with it, if you have it set to English, you would always interact with it in English. If you have it set to Spanish, you would always interact with it in Spanish. So it should, there shouldn't be a confusion of you ask, you know, you're not switching between languages. So ideally it's better. That may not be the experience you have. I can't specifically speak to it, but I know that they're working, language is important to them, and I think they are trying to improve all these, but it's hard.
Different variations, like for Spanish, it's Spanish for Spain, which is so totally different.
Now, I think that the new support for Spanish in Actions on Google, I think they have a couple different versions, but I don't know, I'd have to look it up, but they do try to add variation.
We simplified the list of just saying Spanish, but in reality, they are supporting specific dialects of each.
Yeah. Like they do with English, they do have Australian, UK, Canada. There were a couple of questions over here I think, yeah, go ahead.
I was kind of curious about with all IoT things, so do you register that?
Okay, so the question is, how do you, about what Dialogflow calls invocation. So how you get your app to start listening to you, kind of, how do you bring it into being? So yes, you do kind of register it.
That application process, you submit a keyword phrase. It has to be two words that are not the is type of word.
Not Google, not, you know, there's a list of reserved words that you can't.
And so then that's then reserved for your application. Basically, yeah.
I think that there is, you can register a name before your app is finished, but they are concerned about people like squatting on names. So I think if you reserve a name but somebody else has their app done before you, you might not get it.
Build your app now so you can get your name now.
Yeah. Now is the time. There's going to be a land grab, you know.
Is there a charge for registering this?
Is there a charge to use these tools to make these apps?
No, to reserve them.
No charge to reserve names. No charge for any of this. This is all available for.
Dialogflow has a paid tier so that they provide some amount for free, and then once you get a certain amount of usage, you then have to start paying Dialogflow, but you could skip Dialogflow and just use your server directly if you want. So
yeah, no charge at the level that we're working at. But
one more question.
Yeah. There's one over here. There. You guys decide.
Fight.
Start speaking.
So does that mean that Dialogflow happens not on the device, but it has to reach out to their web service, which then reaches out to your web service?
This basically all, yes, this basically all happens in the cloud.
Yeah.
You have the local device recording, and then all of the processing of that and handing it off and the instructions all happens in the cloud, which then sends the response back to the device.
Is there any way to subvert that process?
I don't think so. I think you have to do that. I mean, the part of the goal of this is that you have discrete devices that might have their own internet connection, or you might be in a completely different place, and they want all of those to work consistently. They don't want sometimes this device to work because you're in that location.
Now you can build your own device and use the SDK without all this kind of sugar on top of it.
So you could almost say your code never makes it.
to the device?
No. No, you don't have to physically install your code on the device. Yeah.
All right, thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of the conference.